Good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, this is Newsfeed, the weekend edition. And if you have been watching Newsroom Africa, we have been focusing for the better part of the day on the registration for local government elections. And earlier, Trade Union Federation, COSATU, convened a special Central Executive Committee meeting to discuss how the elections could affect workers in what they are calling a crisis of capitalism. That is in inverted commas, a crisis of capitalism. That's what COSATU unions are calling this. COSATU is also concerned about government austerity plans that have affected wage demands by public servants. So, Mwelezi Mbeki is a political economist and the deputy chairman of the South African Institute of International Affairs, and he joins me now for that discussion. Mr. Mbeki, thank you very much for making time to talk to us. So, on Thursday, COSATU coming out to say they want a meeting with the ANC, possibly on an urgent basis, to discuss how COSATU is going to approach these upcoming elections. On the other hand, you read newspapers today, and we are told of COSATU affiliates that were at each other's throats at that special CEC meeting over this matter, about whether or not to support the ANC. What do you read into this situation?
Well, I think COSATU is very frustrated with its relationship with the ANC. That's what really comes out in what has been going on in the past few days. The COSATU member unions in the public sector, like the teachers, the police, the health workers, they had a 3-year agreement with the government over wages. And then after 2 years, the government unilaterally decided not to honor the 3rd year of the agreement. So COSATU is very frustrated because, after all, COSATU and the ANC are allies, are members of an alliance. So COSATU is saying, what kind of an ally are you who just unilaterally throw overboard an agreement that we had entered into when it suits you? So I think I sense, this is what I sense, that COSATU is very frustrated with the government.
Yeah, and you know, on Thursday, Mr. Mbeki, I had a conversation with Lebohang Pegu, and she seemed to suggest that the government on this issue of the last leg of the 3-year wage agreement, it cannot possibly use COVID-19 as an excuse, because it was before COVID-19 that the government had made this decision that this deal is not going to be implemented.
Yes, I agree with her. If you remember, the Minister of Finance had announced that the last year of that deal was not going to be implemented. And this was during the budget in February, so which was before the issue of COVID-19 was center stage. So she's right that the government had decided before COVID-19, but I don't think that is the only reason that they are giving it. They just say they haven't got the money.
You have held the view for a longish time now that time is up for this relationship. And I suspect you are going to tell me that that prediction, it almost is ringing true, although I guess the one party which is being abused here, and that is COSATU, is not ready yet to let go of this relationship.
Yes, I worked for COSATU in the early 90s. In fact, I was head of communication for COSATU from 1990 to 1993. And the relationship with the ANC was very good. There was very good consultation between COSATU and the ANC. For example, in the constitutional negotiations at Kempton Park, COSATU had a representative in the ANC team that I think Jayendra Naidu was the COSATU representative. So many of the issues that COSATU wanted to have a view on, it did have a view on. For example, Section 25 of the Constitution about property rights. I remember very lengthy discussions in COSATU Central Executive Committee about the issue of Section 25 of the Constitution. And eventually a compromise was reached, which is the Section 25 that eventually got accepted. But I think what the unions didn't realize was it was one thing to have a partner with the ANC when you were fighting against apartheid. The ANC was in opposition. Mm. It's another thing to have an alliance when the ANC is the government. Because the ANC now has to decide policies for the country. Mm. It is no longer an opposition. It has to decide. It's elected by people. The last election, the ANC got 10 million voters. So it has to answer to those voters. Mm. And this is where I think the difficulty is with both the ANC and COSATU. Both of them don't know how to end this relationship. So it continues to be an unhappy relationship. The ANC has to deliver on its manifestos to the electorate. COSATU has to deliver to its members who work for the government. So this is where you get this perennial friction between these two allies.
You suggest that neither party knows how to exactly end this relationship. Well, the alliance partners themselves, they will have you believe that, no, the relationship, all it needs is just reconfiguration. In your mind, what does that reconfigured ANC alliance look like?
Well, I don't think there is actually any alternative because as I say, the ANC is elected by an electorate, and the electorate elects the ANC on a certain manifesto. Now, the alliance, let us assume, agrees on the manifesto that the ANC takes out to the voters. So that manifesto is what the ANC and its allies, especially COSATU, have agreed on. But it's now the ANC has to implement it as the government. COSATU is not the government. So this is where the problem arises, is that the government has responsibility. For example, the Minister of Finance is saying that the level of debt of the South African government is way beyond acceptable level, that it will bring down the finances of the country if the level of debt is not contained. But the finance minister's solution to this problem is to cut the salaries of COSATU members who are employed by the government. And this is where then you start to see a lot of unhappiness on the part of COSATU and some of the COSATU unions. For example, the NAHAU, the Health and Education Workers Union, have already said that they will not provide finance to the ANC, and they will not ask their members to work for the ANC during the local government election.
So, and I'm glad that you mentioned NAHAU, because the last union to withhold electoral support for the ANC going into the elections, it was the largest affiliate of COSATU, by the way. Talk about coincidences. That was NUMSA, which was booted out. It was in 2014. Yeah. You fast forward to 2021, NAHAU, the largest affiliate that remains in COSATU, is saying exactly the same. Will they possibly suffer the same fate as NUMSA, or might COSATU actually be hard-pressed to kick out its largest affiliate?
I don't think COSATU will kick out its largest affiliate because, you know, the experience of kicking NUMSA has been very traumatic for COSATU. It has been traumatic for NUMSA as well. So kicking out members in COSATU is not a good scenario. It's not a good option. But so my guess is that the COSATU leadership will pretend that they haven't heard what Nehao said, and let Nehao do what it does, and or not do what it says it's not going to do, and leave it at that.
And then the broader picture, because also when you look at the ANC alliance formation, it becomes important not just going into election matters, but it also becomes important when it comes to internal elections within the ANC. COSATU were the first out of the starting blocks to support Cyril Ramaphosa's candidacy going to Nasrec. Today, they are complaining that Cyril Ramaphosa's administration is not looking after the interests of workers. What might the picture look like going to 2022? That's the next ANC elective conference, if my calculations are correct.
Yes, your calculations are correct, but South Africa, or the ANC government, is now in the habit of kicking out ANC presidents before the end of their terms. So that's a scenario which you shouldn't discount, that if COSATU or Nehao and some of the other COSATU unions, and maybe the Communist Party, that's the other member of the alliance, and then of course you have the other factions of the ANC, like the Radical Economic Transformation Group. If these gang up against Cyril, they could remove him before the end of his term. So these are the scenarios that we're sitting with in this country, which is why in South Africa there's an increasing sense that there is political instability in South Africa. Yeah.
Perhaps as a final question before I let you go, I'm trying to phrase this question very properly, Mr. Mbeki. I'm trying to look into the position of the president of the ANC and that of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa. Where do things sit for him right now, politically speaking? Because if a certain clip is to be believed, that would have come out of the latest NEC meeting. It's a recording of the president where you can clearly hear him, until, of course, it is authenticated. I know someone will say, but why are you talking about a clip that has not been authenticated on air? But it's out there. We've got to speak about it. He talks about how the president of the ANC, or his recent predecessor, Jacob Zuma, sees him as a deceitful man. And then he tends to also go back to Mbeki's time, the former president, Thabo Mbeki, and talks about how he was removed. And basically, he seems to suggest that the two recent presidents of the ANC have not had or not enjoyed a relationship of trust with him. I found that quite interesting. What do you make of that?
Well, I find that very difficult too, because although the Ramaphosa was in the National Executive Committee of the ANC since 1991, he has been there, and he served as Secretary General of the ANC, and so on. So I think he has to be careful himself not to personalize what are really political ANC political issues. Because if he's saying Jacob Zuma didn't trust him, well, I guess Thabo Mbeki didn't trust Jacob Zuma either, and so it goes on. So using that scenario, then ANC presidents don't trust each other, and at the end of the day, they end up colluding to have the president's terms terminated before the end. Now, this is, in my view, is bad for South Africa because it creates the impression to the whole world that we don't know how to run our affairs. A presidential term, we've had two presidents whose terms have not been completed. They were booted out by the National Executive of the ANC. Now, if Ramaphosa feels that he's surrounded by critics within the ANC and are colluding with the past president, so this is bad news for South Africa. We need stability in our country in order to be able to solve the problems. For example, the problem of vaccination. Surely President Ramaphosa should be devoting his time to solving the problem of vaccination. England has vaccinated 30 million people. We haven't even begun. So that is a serious, serious problem in terms of the health of our population. Now, looking over your shoulder as to what past presidents think of you as an individual, to me, I think it's a very unhealthy environment that we are seeing in the ANC.
Well, I suppose the lesson there, don't personalize politics, focus on the work at hand, and that is that of running the government. Mwelezi Mbeki, thank you very much for your time, a political economist and deputy chairman of the South African Institute of International Affairs. Thanks indeed for your insights there. Well.